Welcome to the Intelligence Spotlight. This is a space where we slow down the news cycle and look instead at how journalism actually works under pressure, not just what gets published, but how decisions are made, how power is investigated, and what it costs to pursue truth in complex political environments. Today's conversation sits exactly in that space. We're talking about investigative journalism, open source and data-driven reporting, and what it means to lead and protect independent media at a time when trust, access, and safety are all under strain. Joined today by Gemma Terés Arilla, a journalist and media leader based in Berlin. Gemma has worked across Europe and beyond reporting on politics and society, and she's currently the executive director of Tals Panther Stiftung, where she focuses on strengthening independent and inclusive journalism and supporting the next generation of reporters. Gemma, it's great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. So we have a very unexpected question for all of our guests, which usually that's how we start. What's the one thing you hate a lot in Germany?
In Germany,
Or you can say what,
I
or you
think,
can say
okay,
something.
yeah, as it's so spontaneously, the first thing that came up of my mind is the food. Originally, I come from the north of Spain, and I have a German man, and we're always discussing on food. I mean, we are arguing, not discussing, but arguing on food. I mean, I realized that we have been grown up in a different ways in terms of the food culture. I mean, I'd say that food, for my understanding, is like also part of socialization, of cooking together, of getting together. It's more than just I'm hungry, I want to eat, but it has another meaning. So far, I'm in Germany 22 years already, like half of my life. So far, that's been my experience with food and with the Germans in terms of how they understand food and how different it is from the way I've been grown up. I think that's the first thing I would say spontaneously. Yeah.
Well, I guess I agree on that as well. I find it like a lot of things are boiled without having more to it, I guess. Yeah, food is always a good conversation to have, whether we love it or hate it. No makes us political to say that, oh, you're politically incorrect because you hate this food, because food is food. Anyways, so it's interesting to look at your background as well and to know more about how you started and how you arrived where you are today, especially when you moved from Spain to Berlin and pivoted into foreign correspondence. What was the internal conversation in your head about what journalism could and should do in the world? I mean, this isn't just about your CV highlights. I just want to know the human motivation you had behind all of your choices.
Yeah, for me, journalism was always very linked to traveling and to languages and to understanding how other cultures or things out there works. That's why from the very beginning, my link to journalism was always like willing to be a foreign correspondent. That's why I moved to Germany when I was 22 after finishing my studies, because it was always linked to that. And in a wider sense, I would say that what pulled me in was like this wanting to understand how power actually works, especially when it's uneven or hidden. And also I see journalism as a way to make sense of complexity rather than simplify it. So a word which is linked to journalism since the very beginning is responsibility, because journalism still shapes societies. One last thing, I mean, one journalist or a person that inspired me since the very beginning was the Polish reporter Ryszard Kapuscinski. And I still remember one book that I read back then when I was, 15, 16, 17, something like this. I think it's like a conversation with him. And the title in English, I guess it's something like Cynics Aren't Suited for This Profession, like meaning journalism. So it remains totally actual, because it's about truth, it's about ethics, and it's about giving voice not just to the ministers and the politicians, but also like to everyone in this society, and that's what he was doing. And I think that it really shaped me and continues to make sense in the way I understand journalism and the way I'm now running the Tatspanta Foundation, where we support this kind of independent journalism and giving voice to different kinds of authors or of media makers.
Well, that's quite an interesting thing, because you also quoted one of the people who wrote a book about journalism, which is, it's not a, you said, I think it's not a job for cynic people, or it's a job for cynic people,
It's not a
something
job.
like that.
It's not for cynic people journalism.
I'll keep an eye. I'll look into it as well. But also, I mean, you have your academic background is in Eastern European studies, right? Which also eventually brought you to cover places like Russia, Belarus, and also Central Europe. But that was before you come to cover Latin America, right? So how did that training discipline shape the way you approach stories today, if you are like looking at journalism based on those experiences, especially where context could be more complex and opaque?
My journey in Eastern Europe, or especially I was a lot in this border, or the political border we've made between European Union and Russia. So I was concentrating a lot on Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova. And what really interested me there was like this the influence of the power of this post-Soviet situation we have there, with Russians still willing to keep the control on these countries that used to be Soviet. Now we see it with the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. And then on the other side, you had like the neighborhood policy of the European Union also trying to politically influence these countries. So the first time I was there was like beginning of 2000. And this, you could see it also in the way journalists were doing their jobs in these border countries. Let's call it like this border in terms of spheres of control. And
Right.
and I said it at the beginning. I mean, the way to understand how the power is being takes place, and which mechanisms are being implemented in order to establish the agenda setting in journalism, in politics. This is something that really interests me. And I was able to live also in Belarus, which is quite difficult as a journalist. I mean, right now, I guess I'm on the blacklist and I'm not able to come back there. But I was there when I was doing my master's studies on Eastern Europe. So I use like the joker of being a student, not a journalist. And I could see how the possibilities of working underground, of doing independent journalism in the country slowly disappeared. I mean, I was there 2007, and there was still independent journalism ongoing in Minsk, for example, Nasha Niva, but also some activists doing their job against Lukashenko, who was already in power. And right now the repression has been unbearable, and there's no independent journalism in the country. The journalists are in exile, or the ones that are there, they are in prison. So I think it was great having the opportunity to still live in a country where you could kind of see how this underground journalism can be made. But it's of course sad to see that right now also the journalists that we are supporting from the foundation, they are mostly in Poland or in the Baltics, because there's almost no window of opportunity of working there.
Yeah. It's quite tough to be a journalist these days in those places, especially if you not just independent, but even if you're working for a news outlet, you're always bound by certain editorial guidelines that are basically censorship laws. That you shouldn't cover this, you shouldn't cover this, you shouldn't do this. But if you do, you end up in jail. So my question is that let's say a scenario, let's imagine a scenario. You're going to Belarus as a foreign correspondent, and you independently cover what you see, what you want to cover. And that is somehow against the the current censorship laws
Mhm.
in Belarus. What will happen to you?
Well, it's a fictionary scenario. We cannot
Yeah.
say, but one possibility, of course, is that they get arrested. I mean, we've had this case of foreign journalists being arrested in Russia, for example. The U.S. Do you remember the case? That's one possible scenario. But what we've also seen in countries like in Latin America and Cuba, we work with some independent journalists from Cuba. What we heard from them is that if you are a foreign journalist and you report in these authoritarian countries, nothing will happen because you will be reporting for a foreign audience. But the problem is when the local journalists are reporting for the national audience. That's what these authoritarian regimes don't want to see. And that's when the repression takes place. So I guess that we could have both scenarios. One scenario when nothing happens, and on one scenario when I do get arrested. Yeah.
Right.
Let's see.
So it's a risky scenario in either way. It's a risk and a huge risk. So Gemma, since stepping into the role of executive director of the Task Panther Foundation, what has been the most unexpected leadership lesson you've learned about sustaining independent, inclusive journalism, especially those that are under political pressure?
Yeah, thanks for the very important question. I guess what I've learned the last year, 2025, has been to which extent the importance of the U.S. funding, to which extent the support of the U.S. funding was important for a lot of NGOs and a lot of independent journalists worldwide, and to which extent this cannot be counterbalanced. I mean, the gap is there, and there isn't any other government, any other institution, any European Union funds that can fill the gap. And the Tatpanda Foundation is financially supporting some journalists, some organizations, but that's not our main core because we are a small organization, and we run our own project where we support these independent journalists, but we are not giving funds. So that was one of the challenges and one of the reality checks I had last year, understanding that the cut of the U.S. aid by Trump's U.S. government cannot be really balanced. Also, as a Panther Foundation, when looking for alternative fundings, we saw that everybody is looking into the same direction. Everybody is contacting the same institutions. It's like the market is small, and we have to think of alternative ways of moving forward. One of the consequences of this bad consequence has been understanding the power and the power of networking, the power of cooperation. I mean, that's what we can do. I mean, the Tatpanda Foundation has been around the last 17 years, so since end 2008. That's when it was founded. And we have a huge network of ex-fellows, of alumni, and of cooperation partners that now we are very, very active, reactivating in order to connect the dots, in order to connect each other and try to fill the gap where there is this lack of resources. At least through cooperation, we can try to move forward some of the projects and to keep supporting independent journalism.
Yeah, that's some amazing work out there. And I think we need more of people like you and like Task Foundation to do more, because I think the best adaptation strategy would be in this very strained financial ecosystem of funding situations would be to collaborate with other foundations or other people so that they jointly can carry on their missions that they have. So on that, I want to know currently which opportunities could independent journalists seek from your foundation at the moment? I saw a while ago there was this residency fellowship announced by your organization. Could you tell us more about that? I'm sure some of our audience would find it interesting.
Yes, that's called Rest and Resilience Fellowship. And we started it 2015, and we are still running the call until mid-January. So until mid-January, the call is open, and it means that we offer the possibility to come to Berlin for 6 months. That's from beginning of May until end of October. We choose the nicest months in Berlin, not the darkest ones. Why? Because this fellowship is in order to give some space, some rest, to offer a break to journalists that are at risk, that are under psychological threat, that come from war countries or countries in crisis, and that really needs to regain a little bit of energy to stop and to think how it goes further. It's important, like, to understand that it's not like an emergency fellowship. It's not for journalists that really need to leave the country yesterday, so to say. But it's like the stadium before that. It's the level before that, when you realize that I don't know, that perhaps you are an investigative journalist, and you are facing a lot of threats from, I don't know, from a drug cartel. We just had someone from Venezuela in 2025, or also from the government. We had someone also from Mexico, and you need to leave your country for some months and to try to recover and go further. During these 6 months, we offer a flat in Berlin. Well, 2 flats, because it's 2 fellowships. So 2 positions are offered. Right. There's a flat there. There's pocket money for each month. We offer mental health training, hate aid. We cooperate with other institutions for these courses. Also, if the person really needs like personalized psychological support in his or her language, we also organize that. We offer language courses, and we offer the possibility to network with other journalists that are right now in some of our other programs, or with German journalists. These journalists are not obliged to work. They don't have to work while being in Germany. As I said, they get this pocket money, so they get some money while being there. The main idea is, to have a rest and regain this power in order to come back to their countries and be able to continue doing this very important work of independent journalism.
Definitely. We will definitely share the links and promote the fellowship from our channels as well. I'm sure there will be more applicants from there. Let's talk about how journalism overall is under pressure. It's, instead of getting better, and more countries are joining in that cycle of like putting more pressure on journalism and journalists overall. You've also moderated conversations on journalism under threat, including sessions on violence against reporters in Latin America. How do you personally process reporting on violence and repression while still staying grounded and resilient?
It's very important to stay connected to the reality. It's quite simple, but it's very important, like, to make a cut between your work and your life, your personal life. Although I'm in journalism, is like, for me, it's much more than just work. It's like I'm a journalist. It's 24 hours, 7 days. Still, it helps me a lot to come back home and to have my kids. I have 3 kids. I have a husband who is not a journalist, and I personally love music, and it helps me a lot to switch the scenario, to forget a little bit about what we've just heard, these stories. Still, it doesn't always work, and especially right now that we come from Christmas time, and I met other members of my family who have nothing to do with journalism, and they were speaking about their work life, their work routines, and I realized that myself, I was kind of absent, because when listening to them, then I was comparing their story with my stories, and I was like, okay, my job is about, people that may be dying because of their job. My work is about journalists that are now in prison. That my work is about journalists in exile that are not able to see their families for many years because of their journalistic work. And so sometimes I see myself like being a kind of an UFO in my daily life, because I realize that they are very tough stories dealing with. It's about human lives. So the theory is what I'm saying: staying connected to people who are not related to journalism, staying connected to music, but that's the theory. The reality is that sometimes, it's not possible to disconnect because it's too tough.
And we're humans, so we
Exactly.
can't be switched that easily. So across your career, because you also are based in Germany for many years now, you work with multiple media systems as well, like let's say from German outlets to Spanish speaking audiences. So what differences in your journalistic culture have forced you to think your assumptions about storytelling, to rethink it? Let's say you had a particular perception, let's say from one cultural perspective, and then you've worked in another and moved to Germany. Maybe you've experienced another culture in
Mm,
journalism. Have you had that rethinking
mm.
moment about your assumption, oh, this could be true or not, and then you see it differently from a different cultural angle?
Not necessarily cultural. I would put the difference between the ownership of the media in terms of
Mm,
if it's a public media or if it's a private, and depending on which role I was, if I was on payroll, if I was a freelance. So what I experienced when working for public media stations or public media, it's that, of course, depending on the political party that was in the government, they were trying to push the agenda setting, and
yeah.
this message you will feel it as a journalist working in the newsroom, and sometimes it would be a very subtle manipulation, let's put it like this, in
Mhm.
terms of wording, the way you refer to a person or the way you refer to a country or a region, in order to make the audience believe or to make the audience understand which is the importance of this person or of this regional area. And
Right.
also, once when working in a newsroom, I was working as a producer, so I wasn't like a journalist, but I was organizing the stories, the coverage of the stories. And I have had a situation where my main editor was asking me not just to organize an interview with a person in Berlin, but she was asking me to stage the answers that this person would be telling afterwards the videographer that would be running the interviews. This kind of manipulation or trying to set up the contents of coverage. I've experienced it, and it doesn't have to be it's not related to cultural, but it's related to the ownership, as I said, and the political aims behind the media outlet. I mean, no need to say that I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to organize this interview. You will get the appointment with this person, but I'm not telling this person what to say. It's
Yeah.
that's not ethical.
Mm.
Yeah, I also had one situation when we knew of a demonstration that was back during this so-called migration crisis 10 years ago, and I
Yeah.
remember that there was a group of neo-Nazis organizing like a protest. I think it was in the border between Slovakia and Austria, and they called us. I was also still a producer, and they would tell us, oh, we are going to do a demonstration. Come here with your cameraman. So we had like this scoop. So it was good, not to be there.
Yeah.
And be able to film this demonstration before others could go there. The point is that this neo-Nazi then offer us to share the car with them. So they offer our cameraman to drive with the same car with them to the border, and then I said, I'm sorry, but I cannot. It's like, it's not ethical. I mean, I wasn't the cameraman, I was the producer, I was speaking with them. And for me, that was also like, a kind of
Yeah.
no-go area there. Yeah.
Yeah, those are some very fine lines that you have to decide quickly, because I see what you mean, and that's to do with you don't want to be indebted for someone who is actually maybe doing a demonstration and then actually driving you there, and in a psychological way, it kind of makes you owe them, so you want to make the story and based on their narratives. That happens in a lot of situations as well, where journalists are also invited for feasts, so for
Yeah.
dinners, for things like that, just because to shape their narratives, so that you cannot write directly what you saw, but rather maybe use words that are not so direct or has this narrative angle to it.
Yeah.
It is.
And absolutely. And that's what we've seen also now with the war in Gaza, but also with the Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine. And that's why it's so important to support these local independent journalists. I mean, not all the... I mean, it depends if we are speaking of print or radio or television. Now I'm working for Taz Panda Foundation, which is linked to a print newspaper. So speaking of print, what I've experienced since 2022, since then I'm at the Taz, we've seen how important it is to have people on the ground. And the Taz is working, the newspaper is working very often with local journalists, and we are translating, like they are working in Ukrainian or in Russian or in Arabic, and then we would be translating in German. But I know that's not everywhere like this. Not all the newsroom are going this way, but this helps trying to find these other perspectives, because otherwise the alternative is to be embedded, I don't know, with the Israeli soldiers going to Gaza, and then it happens what you are describing. So also in this context, it's super important to support these local voices that try to report from another side and not linked to the government or to the powers behind the media outlets.
True. I think we want to go a bit deeper into the methodology part. Let's say we're all just new journalists or just starting our careers in journalism. And for audience, I'm sure a lot of them are either recent graduates or are studying journalism or similar fields. Could you maybe walk us through how you choose your next project or investigation? If you're an investigative journalist, do you, let's say, start with a hypothesis or maybe a conversation or maybe a data set you found or something else entirely? How exactly do you know when a story needs to be pursued or worth pursuing?
Well, the beginning of a story may vary. I mean, it can begin with how to say that, from an agency. I mean, we can just get it like from one of these, how's it called? A Meldung? How's it in English?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like,
registered ones, yeah.
when you get, it comes like from a headline from an agency that sometimes you just, I mean, we don't do it in the Taz, but some media just copy paste it and then publish it as an agency piece of news. You can start like taking it, pulling it out, and then start investigation from there. It can also begin with a call. I mean, I've given you the example of the neo-Nazis, which it was just a demonstration. But in this case, you can get a call from someone saying, I'm here at the border and I'm seeing that the police is pushing back immigrants, example, in Lithuania, Belarus border. And it can also start when you are in a newsletter of an NGO being active on one field, and then they will publish also like a statement or a piece of news, and then you will pull it out and start investigating. What is important is to contrast. What is important is not to stick to one source, but to, when you get there, to start, making like a kind of circle and trying to look into this possible news from different angles. And also when something becomes a piece of news, it's when you can escalate it with it, when it's just not one, I don't know, sporadic thing that happens somewhere, but when you see there's a kind of pattern, then it becomes a news. I mean, now my answer was kind of, it's a mix, but it depends also on which position you are. If I'm speaking as a freelance pitching for Spanish media when being in Germany, that's one perspective. Another perspective is when I'm working as an editor in the newsroom and a correspondent is pitching me something. It's a very wide topic that we can discuss for hours depending on which position I'm in, because when you are an editor, you have to think also of the audience. You can decide if it's news or if it's news. You have to think, who are you working for, which is your target. Is it interesting for your audience? Have you already covered that? Is another perspective. It's a very depends on which position I'm answering the question from. Yeah.
And it's in a way, like I personally, whenever there is something news happening, even though as an open source investigator, for instance, the news came up of the US strikes and Caracas in Venezuela, and then we suddenly see these videos of the American Chinook helicopters in Caracas and a couple of more helicopters. For a moment, I personally said, okay, let's not jump into conclusion. Maybe this could be AI generated. Maybe this could be, you never know, old footage I used, because whenever there is a crisis, people just flood the space with any video they find and kind of manipulates it. And apparently that video was real. And a lot of people were just like texting me, hey, this is AI generated. And I already investigated it and I already looked at the angle and the position of those helicopters. And I was like, and they were just flying from the sea towards Caracas, crossing those hilly areas.
Mhm.
It was quite interesting for me. So for me, that particular, let's say that's a story, just the helicopters are stories for me. First thing I would do is to look, okay, whether this video is real or not,
Mhm.
and then from which direction they're coming, where exactly is the geolocation part of it. So all of that, that's how I usually start in my field. But of course, other journalists, like let's say, because investigators just investigate, they don't put stories around it. But journalists, they need stories as well around it. Okay, why? Okay, what was the context? Okay, how they came, what happened, and more information, some snippets from other experts that would include all of it into one big story. So let's see the next 5 years for journalism. What makes you most hopeful about journalism? Or you can also put it like, what worries you the most about journalism in the next 5 years?
What makes me hopeful is that we are kind of going also analog again. We are kind of trying to find other ways outside print, radio, television, with what we've just mentioned, in order to make journalism much closer to the people. Because I think that we are facing a lack of trust into journalism, and the way to regain this trust is, for me, it's clearly to go local, because that's when, in this local level, is when people do know each other and to start building this trust. And in this local journalism, we have it all over the world. You have the deserts, these news deserts, but because local journalism has disappeared. And what we see, for example, in Germany, is that a lot of political parties, for example, the far right wingers AfD, are financing these free newspapers that you can get, I don't know, in the bakery, for example. They are full of advertisements, and they are, manipulated by these political parties financing these free newspapers. So I think we should start thinking outside of this box of these classical journalism formats, and try to think of other ways of reaching people and of transmitting the information. Because also social media, I mean, I think that people don't see the social media as a trustful source of journalism. I mean, you can also not verify all the context. So I think that the where there's still hope is in these analog formats. As I said, I mean, connecting somehow local with global. And yeah, I think this gives me hope. And also at the same time, again, this networking, the understanding that the topics that may interest someone from Germany may be the same like someone living in, I don't know, in Minnesota. And perhaps we have to, so now I would be saying the opposite what I've just said. So perhaps we should think journalism less nationally and more globally, in terms of, of horizontal, like topics that connect us all, and trying to think of media platforms or of media formats where, more like less national oriented, but more like topic oriented, but where everybody is connected. And we can set up a network of audience, not just of a network of journalism, but also of audience that are connected through these common interests and common topics. I don't know. I think that these are possible formats we could explore in the future. So locally, but at the same time globally, but horizontally. I don't know if I've made myself clear.
I think that needs a bit of unpacking in itself. That's why it's good that uh, it's not a live session; it's a recorded one, so the audience could repeat that part a couple of times to get that, because it needs more in-depth discussion. Gemma, I'm sure you had these moments. Maybe you were in interviews, and then the whole interview finished, and then you were like, "They never asked me this question or that question." So, what question do you wish every interviewer asked you but never has?
One thing that really interests me is the question of clichés and how's it called, like how's it called, like the Sorry, my German is too much in
Yeah,
my
it's
front.
more like cliche, I guess.
You know
That's
what I
what.
mean? I think a part of journalism is about breaking these cliches. It's about not transmitting a monolithic idea of what's Germany, what's Spain, what's Latin America. So I love to say that what I've been trying to do all through my career, but also now with the Panther Foundation, is this multiple perspective and trying to explain a country or a region not in a monolithic way. And I mean, we've barely spoken about Latin America, but for example, one cliche that's very often linked to Latin America is this violence and drugs and violence and so on.
Mm,
And I think that sometimes people in Western Europe, where I'm based and where I come from, sometimes missing the structural part of it, and to understand the complexity of the whole system, and also understanding that it's not just about drugs, which is one of the big topic linked to Latin America, but it's also about the vegetables that some Europeans are eating here. That behind the production chain of these vegetables that come from Latin America, you also find drug cartels in there. So it's not
right.
just the drug dealers, but also the vegetables you are eating in Berlin sometimes are on your table because of drug cartels. So it's a huge
Mm,
system behind that, and we have to think of the responsibility that there's behind it as a Europeans, and that's the thing, and that's because sometimes when you report on cliché, or when you foster these cliches, you disconnect from the reality. And I think we have to think in a much more complex and systematic way, because a lot of things in this world are connected. A lot of pieces of news, now speaking of Latin America, are also linked to your reality in Berlin. And I think that's important to understand and to keep reporting on that. And this would help breaking these cliches and these narratives of the goods and the bads, and I don't know, both the global south and the north and south, we are much more connected than we think.
Gemma, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
This is Intelligence Spotlight series. Until next time.